The Atlanta Falcons may have finally cracked the code after weeks of frustration, but what unfolded in their latest performance has raised more questions than answers. A dramatic shift in offensive identity, a surprising resurgence, and a brewing controversy at the heart of it all have set the stage for a potential turning point in the franchise's future. What really changed? And could this be the moment that defines the direction of the entire organization? Let's get into the details, but first click the like button and if possible write in the comments, rise up. Raheem Morris may have just bought himself a lifeline in Atlanta, but the ground beneath him is still trembling. After a demoralizing 5-game losing streak, the Falcons finally broke through with a convincing 24-10 win over division rival New Orleans Saints. On paper, it was a sigh of relief, a game that showed signs of life on both sides of the ball. But beneath the surface, this win might be doing more to expose long-standing problems than solve them. Kirk Cousins, back under center, executed a play-action-heavy attack that was worlds apart from the pistol-heavy scheme Atlanta clung to during Michael Penix Jr.'s stint. The result was stark. The offense looked revitalized. The run game exploded. Bijan Robinson topped 100 scrimmage yards. The middle of the field, long a barren space in this attack, came alive again. This wasn't just a return to form, it was a revelation. In fact, it was such a drastic departure from what fans had been watching all season that even former Falcon Harry Douglas couldn't hold back. His tweet, "It's amazing what happens when the QB goes #under center and you use play action," wasn't just a comment, it was a dagger. Without saying his name, Douglas called out Penix Jr. and Zach Robinson in one clean shot, and he had the numbers on his side. Atlanta lined up under center on 51% of its snaps in Week 12. That's absurd, considering how allergic they seem to be to under center looks for the past year and a half. When the Falcons signed Cousins to a massive $180 million deal in 2024, the expectation was a McVay-style offense built around play action from under center. But inexplicably, the staff built a pistol-based scheme around Cousins, neutering his strengths. And when Penix took over, nothing changed. Despite being younger and mobile, the offense remained stagnant. It wasn't until Cousins returned, and Atlanta returned to what worked, that things finally clicked. So the question isn't just about who's the starter, it's about who this offense was actually built for. Because based on Week 12, it certainly wasn't Penix. This game may be a turning point, not just for Morris, but for the entire franchise. It forced an uncomfortable conversation into the open. Morris himself essentially admitted the sudden change in philosophy came down to one thing: Cousins felt comfortable under center, which is a nice way of saying Penix didn't. That's a problem. You can't tailor your entire offense around a quarterback who isn't comfortable in the very scheme that was supposed to define your identity. That doesn't just raise questions about Penix's future, it puts Zach Robinson's judgment under the microscope as well. And let's not pretend like the Falcons are out of the woods. At 4-7, the season still teeters on the edge. The front office is watching closely. Arthur Blank and Terry Fontenot may be loyal, but they're not blind. If this team continues to struggle, Morris and Fontenot could both be out the door by January. And guess who's lurking in the shadows? Bill Belichick, the 73-year-old coaching legend, currently mired in a disastrous first season at North Carolina, remains a name of interest around the league. Despite going 4-13 in his final season in New England and having a personal life that's become a PR nightmare, teams are still expected to line up for his services in the offseason. And yes, Belichick was one of the final candidates Atlanta passed on in favor of Morris 2 years ago. At the time, it looked like the right call. Morris was the safer, younger option. But with the Falcons faltering and Belichick's name still carrying weight, could Arthur Blank be tempted to hit the reset button again? It's not out of the question. But make no mistake, it would be a massive risk. Not just because Belichick is older and coming off back-to-back failures, but because hiring the man who engineered the Patriots' Super Bowl 51 comeback could reopen wounds that still haven't fully healed for Falcons fans. Let's also be clear, Morris hasn't exactly built an unshakable case for himself. The team has dropped multiple one-possession games this year, including a 23-24 loss to the Patriots in Week 9, where a missed extra point after a Drake London touchdown doomed them. In Week 10, a questionable decision not to call timeout before halftime against the Colts cost them precious scoring time in an overtime loss. These aren't just bad breaks. They're coaching decisions. And the margins in the NFL are razor thin. Still, there are arguments for giving Morris more time. Injuries have decimated the roster. The offensive line, wide receivers, and defensive backfield have all been hit hard. Penix's ACL tear in his second game against Carolina only added to the chaos. And the front office may be wary of more turnover after years of instability. Continuity has value. If Morris can steer the team to a strong finish, especially with Cousins back and the offense finally resembling the vision sold to fans 2 years ago, it might be enough to buy him another year. But the bigger picture looms. The Falcons aren't far off from contending. This roster is stacked with talent. If they do decide to move on from Morris, they can't afford to get it wrong again. Younger offensive minds like Clint Kubiak or Jesse Minter could unlock the potential this team clearly has. Because one more misstep, especially one involving Belichick, could set the franchise back years. So what do you think, Falcons fans? Has Raheem Morris truly earned another shot, or is it time to look for the next leader to finally take this team to the next level? Because if we're being honest, the margin for error is completely gone. Raheem Morris isn't coaching for just one more season, he's coaching for his NFL future. And what's crazy is that his fate might hinge on the very quarterback situation that was supposed to solve Atlanta's problems. Think about the layers here. Penix Jr., handpicked to be the franchise QB of the future, now faces a long recovery from his third ACL tear. That alone would be enough to create uncertainty. But when you add in his lack of comfort in the offensive system, his struggles reading the middle of the field, and his general inconsistency, the questions only multiply. Contrast that with Cousins. He's 37. He's coming off a major injury. He's not the long-term solution. And yet, for the second time in 2 seasons, the Falcons just looked like a real football team with him under center. The offense clicked in a way that made you wonder why it took this long. Why didn't they just stick with what worked when Cousins signed in 2024? Why did they go down this rabbit hole of pistol formations and overly complex timing concepts that neutralized the strengths of not just Cousins, but the entire supporting cast? And that's where Zach Robinson comes back into the spotlight. As the offensive coordinator, he was brought in to be the creative spark from the McVay coaching tree. But the reality is, for much of the last 2 seasons, his system didn't fit his personnel. Bijan Robinson, one of the most explosive backs in the league, wasn't being used correctly. Drake London's role fluctuated. Kyle Pitts remained an enigma. Now, with Cousins under center, suddenly all those pieces seem to fall into place. It's damning. And it makes one thing painfully obvious: this wasn't a talent issue. It was a schematic one. So, if the Falcons want to fix this, it starts at the top. Not just with Morris, but with Robinson as well. You can't afford another year of trying to fit square pegs into round holes. This team doesn't need a rebuild. It needs alignment between coaching philosophy, quarterback identity, and personnel. And if that means moving on from Penix eventually, it's a conversation that needs to happen. Because there's no scenario where this team can thrive if its quarterback doesn't mesh with the system the entire staff is trying to implement. And that's where this story could take an even stranger turn. The idea of a quarterback controversy seemed absurd back in September. Penix was the future. Cousins was the veteran mentor. But now, that line's blurry. If Cousins continues to perform at a high level, do you really bench him again next season, assuming both are healthy? Can you afford to? That's what makes the next few weeks so critical. Atlanta faces the Jets in Week 13, and while that matchup doesn't scream must-watch TV to the casual fan, for Falcons Nation, it could be a turning point. A dominant win might shift the narrative even more in favor of Morris and Cousins. A loss? It could reignite every doubt about this staff's ability to lead the franchise forward. And don't underestimate the optics either. The Falcons are a proud organization. Arthur Blank has invested heavily, not just in players, but in coaches, in facilities, in fan engagement. He doesn't want to be known as the owner who passed on Bill Belichick only to see his hand-picked replacement crash and burn. But he also doesn't want to bring in Belichick now and risk alienating a fan base that still has nightmares about 28-3. Belichick's current disaster at North Carolina doesn't help his case, but his legacy still casts a long shadow. If Blank is tempted to revisit that path, it wouldn't be because of what Belichick is doing now, it would be because of what he's done. But nostalgia isn't a strategy. And hiring Belichick at 73, in the twilight of his career, might send the wrong message that the Falcons are more interested in headlines than building something sustainable. And what about the locker room? That's another layer to this. Morris is respected. Players like him. They play hard for him, even when the results don't go their way. That matters. A coaching change isn't just about schemes, it's about culture. You blow that up without a clear plan, and you risk losing the team entirely. That's why, even with all the frustration, there's still a legitimate case for letting Morris see this through. Maybe not indefinitely, but at least through one more season, with a healthy roster and a clearer vision of what this offense is supposed to be. At the end of the day, this is about direction. The Falcons have the pieces. They have the talent. But unless the coaching staff, and that includes Morris and Robinson, can put those pieces together in a way that makes sense, nothing else matters. So while the win against the Saints was a step in the right direction, it wasn't a cure-all. It was a reminder of what this team could be. Now it's up to Morris to prove it wasn't just a fluke. And if he can't, Then maybe it is time for Arthur Blank to revisit the decision he made 2 years ago. Maybe it's time to finally bring in a coach who can match the ambition of this franchise. Just not the one who already stole the biggest moment in Falcons history. Let us know in the comments, do you believe in Raheem Morris and Kirk Cousins leading this team into 2026, or is it time to blow it up and start fresh with a new vision? Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the next video on your screen. The latest Falcons news, the real behind-the-scenes stories, you'll only find them here. Go Falcons!